record button, and then we can do whatever. But all right, so I'll intro it off. What I'll do is I'd love you to talk a little bit about the Star Wars stuff and your trip to Disney, to kind of kick this off. I think that'd be kind of cool for a lot of people. Um, and then we'll get into that topic,
Okay.
and then we'll move straight into it. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Make the Jump here from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network. It's your guy right here, Mr. Robin Vogt. I'm sure, as I always say, sometimes you get tired of hearing my voice, sometimes you don't. That's why Scott Inch and some of the others are here at the network, including Mr. James Brown himself. But on this special episode of Make the Jump, sitting across from me, and I didn't even know that this guy was literally just an hour away from me. We've been friends on Facebook. We've known each other on Twitter now for a while, and I finally got him here on Make the Jump. It's Mr. John Bishop Jr., of course, from the Friendom itself, also part of Making Star Wars. John, how's it going today, my friend?
It's great. Great. I woke up this morning and on my other side of the beat, I write about Disney, and there was a terrific article about Iger and Barron's this morning. And they were talking about Star Wars Land, and I just got back from there. So it was kind of full circle for me, even though I am following a little bit of a post Disney depression thing going on right now. So
yeah, it's always hard, and I can totally attest to this as well. When you come back from somewhere and you come back to New England, it's like, oh, there's the freezing cold again. Oh, come on, really? And I'm sure, John, please tell us, what was your Disney experience like? I haven't been down there in a very long time. I lived in Sarasota for the longest time. Never really got a chance to get to Disney, so I kind of live it through the stories of people who have been there. So give us all your little background on the experience that you had at Disney recently.
Well, I write for DSNYnewscast.com, and one of the things that I've been doing is following the Galaxy's Edge beat, and Jack Kendall, who is our impresario over there, he's done a really good job of keeping in on the inside info. But the truth of the matter is now it's very clear that they're coming to fruition. I know that the Millennium Falcon's getting finished just like it did over in Disneyland Resort over in California.
Right.
You're beginning to see they're pulling together the transition pieces. There are, trees that are now blocking a lot of the views between the Muppet section and Galaxy's Edge. So they're trying to keep that immersive experience in each of the lands. One of the nice things is that Hollywood Studios is my favorite park. If there was such a thing as a home park, Hollywood Studios always has been. I've always been fascinated by movies. For a long time, all I watched were old black and white films. So the transition to an adventure in the movies, as opposed to how they make the movies, seems pretty seamless. Although there are moments where I'm like, what are they going to do with Star Tours and the Tatooine Traders? And there's moments where I'm like, I don't know if they're going to keep this the way it is. And Jack has always been of the opinion that they're going to get rid of Star Tours, but there's no plans in that. And then they had a very easy out when they closed down the Disneyland Jedi Training Center. And there was this real speculation that this was the end game for anything outside of Galaxy's Edge.
Interesting.
And they did not do that in Walt Disney World. They kept it open and said it steadfastly that it was staying open. So, and there's stuff in between Star Wars Land and the Jedi Training Center / Star Tours and whatever. But Star Tours, one of the things people have to remember about these decisions that they make, they're often made because they need to eat people, right? They need to be able to have capacity.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that they're clearly not sure about is how all of this is going to work. One of the things that is really interesting, at least to a theme park / Star Wars geek like me, is how packed it was when they did Toy Story Land.
Geez,
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, as somebody who loves theme parks, I will not go in there unless someone asks me to.
Interesting.
And part of the reason is that one edge of Toy Story Land abuts directly with Star Wars Land. So
Oh.
there is this wondering about how they're going to move people from here to there. And then prior to the Disney part of my vacation, I went to Universal. And the coolest thing about that is that they have a Mel's Diner, which is based on American Graffiti. So
course.
I was in my heaven for the most part in that space, but the rest of it, my son, who's 8, really wanted to see the Wizarding World. And as a marginal Harry Potter fan, I was like, all right, we'll do that. And then I realized what I was watching was Star Wars Land come to fruition. And, you know, that you hear things about the blasters or lightsabers that might be used in a virtual way. And you're watching, you know, 200 Harry Potter wannabes with their robes on. And I'm talking from, we're talking people from 80 down to 8, all waving their wands around, and you can't walk. You literally can't walk. So other than that, I mean, the Wizarding World is, I think, set the standard for that immersive environment. So I believe Disney has that in hand. I believe that they know what they are bringing to the table is going to be that plus a bag of chips. But at some point, I'm wondering how it's all going to work, because, the casual fan is not going to want to walk in there and, be beat up by people swinging lightsabers.
Right.
And, for the little kid who all he wants to do is pilot the Millennium Falcon. I mean, that's going to be really difficult to do, especially if your family is less than, how many seats are in the pod. So it all is so interesting to me, and the way that Iger has talked about, Bob Iger, the CEO of Walt Disney, has talked about how to manage Star Wars and how important it is to be on the cutting edge and what they do all together. I'm believing that they have a solution in mind, but it'll be really interesting to see how those crowds are managed early on.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, John. And it was something that I actually have recently discussed with a lot of the podcast members. We actually took a drive down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania not that long ago. And we were in the car and we were talking about some of the different aspects that Disney's going to bring to Star Wars Land, some of the conversations probably that Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy have been having behind the scenes about how they're going to handle the marketing of Star Wars Land itself. And the one fascinating thing to me, John, and one of the points you brought up there, was this whole conversation around how they're going to push forward moving people through this park, number one, and the marketing of it. And the one thing I've noticed more recently, and maybe you can speak more to this, is that, they've been talking about the Millennium Falcon experience. They've been talking about some of the individual rides built within Star Wars Land. But that fully immersive experience where you're going to be chased by stormtroopers, the whole lightsaber experience, they haven't really pushed that forward yet. And I'm wondering if it's because of stuff that you're talking about specifically. They don't want to get into that yet because parents are going to see that and they're going to say, oh, that's a little bit too much. We're casual Star Wars fans. We are a family who goes and watches the films, but we don't necessarily want that piece. Do you feel that there's technically a marketing divide, which sometimes happens at these points, where you want to push the marketing for one aspect of your theme park, but leave the other part out for the other side of the fandom? Do you feel like there's some kind of pull happening in there?
I actually think it has more to do with money and being, I mean, as much as I adore Disney and I love everything we're doing, I really feel as if the way that they're going to have to do this is based on space in the park, right?
Right.
And do they want to introduce the whole immersive experience immediately and then have, 3-hour waits just to get in, and then this whole expectation level of the point system and everything that Jack has talked about on his podcast and Jason has written about, all of these things. I mean, you're going to have people just really just walking around and turning their heads in awe. And so, one of the things I think is probably going to happen is, and Jason touched upon this at one point, is that he feels like there's going to be seasons. and that every season will introduce something new.
Right?
Oh,
that's a smart approach. Yeah.
Yeah. And you should ask him about that. And I think Jack kind of picked up on it too, that, some of these patents were just filed,
right.
Last year. And a lot of this stuff may have to be done with, certain glasses on or things like that. Now,
right.
One of the neat things that most Disney fans, I think most casual Disney fans don't even realize, is that at various times throughout their park stay, people are playing games, particularly in the Magic Kingdom, that you wouldn't even realize. So
right.
they have the Wizard's Quest, or I forget what it was called. But in any case, there are people using wands and things within the Magic Kingdom, and you really don't, they're immersed, in whatever they're doing, but you aren't. Right. So I think that there's probably a happy medium there of people who have, people who are 20, 18, 16 and really want to work on their points for a particular day within the system, and then those people who are going to be high end enough to want to do the 3 to 5 day stay in the Disney hotel. I think those experiences are going to be exclusive and a little bit more lucrative for the company than the general kid picking up a wand, picking up a lightsaber a la Harry Potter Land. I do think that we're probably going to get to the point where it will be sort of requisite to have a lightsaber on your or something on your side as you're going through and you're collecting your points and you're doing a good job on the Millennium Falcon and in the other dark ride. But do I think it'll be there immediately? I really don't. I don't see how they can, because it's going to be wall to wall people, and all you have to do is look, 100 yards away in Toy Story Land. It's packed. It's so hot. It's so now they've mitigated that with a lot of the shade that's created by the spires,
right?
And there's enough for people to look at and enough places for people to go. I think that that they'll have an idea of how many people can be in at one single time, but and I also think that one of the good things that's happening at Walt Disney World as opposed to Disneyland is that it's going to open in the fall, so there's going to be a whole lot of people in school at that time, and so you'll have a certain amount of diehards, which I think will come down for a week or two, but then they'll be able to look at what's going on and sort of make on the fly decisions on what's going on going forward.
Right, yeah, you're not doing this. You're not opening this thing during the winter of 2019. You're not trying to push this thing during the times when Florida is absolutely packed and pushing in a lot of people coming out of Sanford, Orlando there. And I think that's a very smart approach. I think one of the best things about this immersive experience that we're going to have is it's everything that we've wanted as a kid. It's everything as a Star Wars fan that we've kind of always wanted to be able to be part of that galaxy far, far away. And since the acquisition of Star Wars by Disney, we were always wondering, well, Disney's buying it. Where's the Star Wars land? Where's the Star Wars theme park? And then Bob Iger and the entire team are able to put something together like this. It really is very special. It's something that I don't think in 2012 we truly had any idea about. There were talks, of course, that, buying this property, of course they're going to do something at Disney, but it was never set in stone to begin with. And this is just such an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan. John, I'm sure you can attest to that as well. It's one of those times where it's just between the books, between the theme parks, between the films, between just television, even now with The Mandalorian, there's so many different aspects of the Star Wars universe that just pulls you in. And John, what's one thing right now that you are super excited about in 2019? Because I know we've got a ton of Star Wars coming next year.
I wouldn't have said this a couple weeks ago, but the coming to fruition of the Star Wars comic has me really wondering, what direction the guy named Sewell, who writes that, Darth Vader.
Sewell, yeah.
I gotta believe he's gonna be on a project or two.
Yeah.
They allowed him to write about Darth Vader's origins, and beyond the obvious, I'm a little disappointed that there was no Star Wars movie this fall.
Right.
I really, and you can tell by my tweets and everything I did in and around it, I really enjoyed Solo. I thought Solo was amongst the better films I saw this year.
Right.
I'm a Star Wars fan, so I'm going to say, yeah, it's the best. But does it compare to the things that are Mary Poppins is evoking, or the pushing of the envelope of the animated genre in Spider-Man or Wreck-It Ralph. No, but in my heart of hearts, this story, this backstory meant a lot to me. And I think that that's a lot of what's going on in these comics.
Right.
And the idea that every week I can go to the comic shop and have a little bit of canon filled out is amazing to a person who literally didn't have anything to watch.
Right.
Really new or really, evocative of the first three between 1983 and then when the Phantom Menace came out. So I filled my time at that point with Robotech, and
right,
and to a certain extent all the other cartoons that were going on, and so a certain amount of nostalgia for other things that I had seen. But really, this we're in. I would imagine that people would call the first three sort of that golden age. But, as somebody who was actually reading the comics at the time, those comics sucked. Like I'm sorry, everyone is so all over the EU and all this. Like, did you ever try to read the EU in order? Or did you try to get through the MedStar duology? Oh my God. I like all this stuff makes me so upset. And yes, I'm an old man, so then I can say yes, I was there in 77 when the first one came out. I don't expect any special privileges, but I can also look back and say what we have now is better than what we had then. And respecting the original trilogy as sacrosanct, everything else that was coming out at that time besides the Kenner toys was not what we're getting now. And if you're a Star Wars fan now of nearly every ilk, and I do think there's a long way to go in terms of diversity in the storytelling. Okay.
Very true.
All right. That, and I can't speak to it heavily because I am a white guy, 44-year-old white guy. It's not my place to judge that, other than to say, I recognize that there is a deficiency.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, the amount of storytelling and the wonderful things that we're getting from the video games, the comic books. Well, we have Dr. Aphra, which I haven't even gotten into. But when I read Dr. Aphra, I'm like, why isn't there a TV show on Dr. Aphra?
Right. No, that's true.
She's incredible. And
she is absolutely incredible.
And it doesn't have a heck of a lot to do with the Skywalker saga at all times. Hera has made appearances and things like that.
Sure.
But I do think, the kind of storytelling that we saw in the final arc of Rebels.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that was how it's going to end up?
Never. I mean, never in a million years.
Yeah, and I used to listen to the Vlog Brothers, and one of the brothers talked about what are books supposed to do. He said books aren't supposed to make you go, okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, he said they're supposed to make your brain go blah 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 blah,
and make you ask more questions. Yep,
exactly. So what I think is so amazing, and probably is lost on a vast majority of the people watching it, is how deeply they're diving into historical mythology, but also pushing our own thought lines along. Wait a minute, what if we're not the only dimension? What if we're not the only ones out there? What if this is not the way, time being what it is? Maybe there are pathways that we haven't even imagined in our short time here on this planet. And, those things, I sound like a, tin hat guy right now, but it as far as I'm concerned, I think the visual mediums are really what books used to be.
Yeah.
So when I'm watching stuff, if it's not challenging me, I'm not watching it. And I will say the vast majority of what I've seen from the Disney Star Wars stuff has allowed me to take my old fandom and plug in a way that I never dreamed about. And that includes the theme park stuff. And that includes Star Tours. And that includes my being able to watch all these brand new movies and see how many times these creators are referencing the original material.
Yeah.
Even last night I went to see Bumblebee. There's a direct 3-line quote from Star Wars in Bumblebee. And I was like, okay, and that's how important these movies have turned out to be, and how diverse that population is. I mean, Bumblebee was written by a woman.
Right.
And so, all of these guys who are, shortchanging people based on anything other than their love of Star Wars, they suck too. So
it's right.
I'm just
it's true.
I'm tired of that stuff.
Me too. Absolutely. I'm absolutely sick and tired of the shortchanging of just people who are creative minds, but just because they look different, carry a different sex or a different race. I agree with you. Being a white 25-year-old male, I have no right to speak for them in particular, but from this perspective and much from yours as well, the one thing that really grabbed my attention when I first saw the stuff for The Mandalorian was, holy crap, Bryce Dallas Howard is going to be directing some episodes of The Mandalorian. And I was like, what a perfect person to come in. Ron Howard's going to be back there watching behind the scenes with what his daughter's going to be able to do with it. And it's funny. Out of the entire announcement of The Mandalorian and Pasquale being the Mandalorian himself and everybody else coming onto the show, that was the one thing that stood out to me, was that Bryce Dallas Howard was going to be working on some episodes.
Well, I'm looking at this as in a much broader view. I mean, if they're doing The Mandalorian, what is the Rogue One TV show going to look like?
Oh, and Cassian, yes.
Diego Luna, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Diego.
But he went on TV one time and said he really wasn't very religious. He sort of believed in something like the Force, and he explained. So, these are people who are being pulled into the saga, who lived it.
Yes.
They're not, I love Harrison Ford. I do. I Indiana Jones and Han Solo are in the pantheon of the,
Preach.
Preach. But here, Diego Luna, who I think is a little bit younger than me, he grew up just like I did, thinking about Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Princess Leia. And this idea that they are being brought into, Bryce Dallas Howard, who I'm sure through her father was a huge Star Wars fan.
Oh, absolutely.
These people who are creating these things lived it, believed in it.
Yes.
And while that, I don't think that we have people who are cultish about it in the creative side of things. These people believed in what George Lucas talked about, in right being right, and that cynicism not being appropriate all the time. And there's something just so uplifting about the idea that you will continue to have things that you can share with your kids that aren't necessarily, ancient fairy tales or along the lines of what we've seen from Disney over the years, but this whole other thing. And it has its own mythology, and it has its own way of doing things, and it has its own rules. And by the way, it's not science fiction, and it's not action adventure. It is what George Lucas called space opera designed for 10-year-olds.
Yep, exactly.
How awesome is that? And now you're going to take that and you're going to plug it into the world's greatest theme park. I mean, the things that bother me in the world are very, there's many. And I sometimes just sit there and say, right, on the one side, we have all of this wonderful stuff, all of these creative minds doing this, and then we have this other junk. And that's at times why I choose, for the sake of my family, for the sake of my mental health, to attach myself to people like yourself, and things like, DSNY Newscast and Making Star Wars, because they're on the right side of things. They're thinking about the creativity. They're thinking about the innovation. They're thinking about the storytelling. And they're thinking about what this means to the people who are coming up behind us. And I just think that's awesome.
That's right. I mean, I share it out all the time. There's that one image on the Brick City Twitter page of myself sitting there, and it says, "We are preparing the next generation for Star Wars." Every conversation we have, every podcast we record, every article that we put out there to these younger kids, but their parents are reading it, and then they're telling their kids, like, hey, this is Star Wars. This is the story. This is what George Lucas wanted to show us. And I think that's the whole point, is just to prepare. And you know what? The Disney parks, Star Wars Land, Galaxy's Edge, that right there is taking that mindset of, we are preparing the next generation for positivity and for what Star Wars is all about. That's exactly what that defines. And that's exactly what all of us are doing in the community, whether it's Making Star Wars, whether it's DSNY News, whether it's yourself, John, whether it's me. It doesn't matter. We're all trying to spread that mindset that George was that, you know what, this is built for the 10 to 12-year-old who's trying to find their way in the world and has to find the difference between what's good and what's wrong. And that's exactly what all of this defines. And I think that going forward, I think we just have to keep doing what we do best. And that's, like you said, for our own sanities, kind of taking out whatever negativity is out there and what other things are being spewed to us, and just focusing on the things that make us happy and make us do better for the world. That's truly what it is.
Well, I think so. And when I was with the Bruins, being the beat writer for BostonBruins.com, and then, as I've done things like Making Star Wars and DSNY, I've always believed that everybody's going through some sort of struggle every day. And as a writer, as a content producer, as somebody who is a father and is trying to learn from all of 44 years of ups and downs in his life, if I can impart 15 minutes, a half hour of fun into the day by pumping out some content that they maybe haven't seen, or distilling down 3 or 4 different stories that they aren't going to have time to read between their jobs, that's, as somebody who has an avocation as a vocation, I know I appreciate that. I know that having that distraction, whether it's a wonderful painting by Shag or some great stuff from the Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, who I just went down and interviewed, those things mean an awful lot to a lot of people. And if you can give a half hour happiness to people every day, that's awesome. But here are people who are doing it on a consistent basis all the time. And that's just incredible.
It really is. And I think where we sit back, and I always say this all the time, I don't know about yourself, John, but I'm like, I don't want to take any credit for that, because
no.
You really don't. I think there's a lot of people out there that try to look for that credit. I think we've seen a lot of that on Twitter. I think we've seen a lot of that with certain hate groups that are out there about one specific film, or no matter how you think about it. They're looking for a little something, and that's something that I think each day, I think with what we do on Twitter and what we do across social media, is to really tackle those people on social media and tell them, you're trying to look for attention, but you're not going to get it with the way that you're approaching it, and you just shut them out. That's all you can do, and encourage people to do that.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you and say I don't get fired up when someone retweets me.
Oh, absolutely not.
But on the flip side, I went to Northeastern for journalism and masters, and I and everyone I work with on both sides of the coin, we all practice proper journalistic citation, and
of course.
And I think that if you do that, then you're on the right side of things, A, from the start, and B, you're allowing the conversation to move forward properly, as opposed to the clickbaity things that happen. And obviously there's a certain number of YouTubers who believe that they have some sort of inside edge, or don't believe that they have an inside edge, and suddenly major publications and outlets are picking up on that.
Of course.
Now that stuff bothers me to high hell.
Absolutely.
Me.
You're good.
And it really is one of those things where I'm hoping that as we move forward, as content imbibers, that the good stuff rises to the top, and that DSNY Newscast, Making Star Wars, yourselves, all the things that are done properly sort of rise to the level of more seen, and and here and there, if we're able to make a buck off that, that's awesome.
Of course.
But on the flip side of it, it is, I think it's more the engagement that floats my boat. I'd love, especially as I get older, and my peers on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and where I'm writing, they're getting older and perhaps dropping off, or not necessarily engaging. When I can engage people of all ages in any sort of conversation where they say, I thought that too. And to a lesser extent, no, I don't agree with you, but that's okay. You know, and those things,
right.
That makes me really, really happy, and it gives me something to talk to my, my 8-year-old about and say, this is what we're shooting for here. We're not, yesterday
right.
I did a very fun little thing on Periscope with Jack, and he's like, "Well, Dad, how much are we going to make off that?" And I said, "Dad," I said, "Jack, I love you to death, but nobody's going to pay to listen to you and I talk about Spider-Man.
Right.
But if we do a good job enough times, maybe somebody will pay us to go watch Spider-Man, or and things like that." So he's starting to get it, and I think that the idea that I'm learning from him as a content consumer is good, because there's times when he's like, "Dad, you don't have to do it like that. That's so lame." I'm like, "Oh my God. Oh, wow. That's very scary."
Right.
So, and then, I am not one of those people who is, take the iPads away from the kids, or like and everyone will say, well, as a society, we're much more closed. And then you can show them the picture of all those people on the subways during the 1940s with a newspaper in their face, or or you can ask the question, would you take a slide rule and a pencil away from a kid in 1955? And they look at you, and I said, well, why would you take away their iPad or their phone, which has access to all the information that they're ever going to need in terms of having to memorize dates and things. Now they have access to actually think about concepts and philosophy and all these things. And so that, when someone's worried about how much I watch Star Wars, or my kids are interested in non-scholastic things, I remember just how much I learned. I knew Nazis were bad from the time I was it 81 or 82 when Raiders of the Lost Ark came out.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to be like those guys. Those guys are bad.
Right.
And then, and I was literally 5 or 6 years old when I figured that out. And then, I remember seeing an interview, or understanding that Lucas had based the Empire on fascist regimes. And I'm like, okay, all right. So now my politics are being formed by things that are other than what's in my school book. Because let's face it, like at some point, all of those school books, especially when I was growing up, were coming from a very narrow point of view.
Oh, very, very narrow.
And so having this ability to see through other people's eyes, through their art, or through their writing, has been great. And on the flip side of it is now having interviewed Shag out there in California a couple times, and I asked him, he's been asked so many times, he's like, well, you based your art on commercialism, you based your art on advertisement, what how does that affect your art? He's like, well, all artists want to sell their work, I'm owning it, I'm owning the idea that I'm going to put my stuff on a bar of soap, and feel happy when somebody buys it, because I'm providing for my family, and I'm getting my art out there. I kind of like that. I like the that's
very cool.
His art is called lowbrow. So I would say I try to take a lowbrow approach when I'm looking at things.
There you go. That's the way to approach it too. Yeah, just kind of pushing it out there, doing what you got to do to get the news out there, but also get something that you're very passionate about out to the public, to people who are probably listening to what we're talking about and reading what you guys do over at Making Star Wars and DSNY. And the whole point of it all is to inform on a level of, this is what's happening right now. These are things that are going on. And like you said about the textbooks, sometimes those words have to be changed. Sometimes you have to be able to move with the times. And I think even with Star Wars, Disney has done such a great job of moving Star Wars with the times, has been able to take something that we remember with the original trilogy and everything, and give us Star Wars Rebels, give us Resistance, give us the comic books. And the one person that still sticks out to me to this day is Claudia Gray. Everything that she's been able to do with the novels, whether it's Lost Stars, which is following, of course, 2 teenagers, people who are pretty much the age that's really getting into Star Wars right now and truly understanding it. And when reading that book, I go back to when I was a teenager and being in that position, and having to live up to the Empire's standards, and that whole balance between love and something that you're passionate for. I mean, Claudia Gray has done that across the board with everything that she's done, and now she's going to be taking on Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, which is going to be absolutely fascinating to see how that develops.
Well, my love for Obi-Wan is I like. Here's the thing, you know, how often do you wake up in the morning and this, you know, I sound like an old fart when I say things like this, but I look in the mirror and I'm like, no, but like I have the kids, right? And
right.
And so you're like, all right, I don't feel like doing this today. I all I want to do is roll back into bed and read my comic books. All right.
Yeah.
But then you have the 2-year-old who's saying, Dada, let's, you know, do this. And it puts a whole new perspective on Obi-Wan's life for me.
Yeah.
And this idea that now we're going to see how Qui-Gon dealt with Obi-Wan.
Yes.
Who, according to canon and according to legends, was not an easy Padawan.
Not at all.
And so all those things you're talking about, not to mention even that Claudia has given us outstanding stories.
Oh yes.
You know, in terms of seeing the eyes through a woman's eyes.
Yes.
That's been incredible. But on the flip side, here I get to read a woman's perspective on how a good quote unquote father would act. And how really cool is that going to be? And how many different lessons can I take to say when the kids do something good or bad? You know, I often put them in very stark, you know, are you trying to be Kylo Ren here? Right. and you laugh.
It's true though.
There, you know, I said, you can do it that way, or would you like to do it the Luke Skywalker way?
Ooh,
and
that's good parenting.
Well, not really, because it's
I don't know.
It's a crutch. It's a crutch, but it also, you know, right. when you're tired and you've been up at 5 and you've had you know, a long vocational day and you're looking forward to a long avocational morning, the things that you come up with to try to assuage strife within the house, right. you work pretty hard at it, and I'm lucky that I often don't necessarily have to do that because my kids are great, and the general, my wife Andrea, she's incredible. But on the flip side of things, you know, I look for new perspectives as much as I can, and Claudia Gray as a purveyor of those perspectives, even in the little manga thing that they did. I hope they continue that, because that was incredible. And those things are mana, you know, like we don't know how long our stay here on this particular planet will be. And if you can fill your life with things that are positive and are looking ahead and looking up, you know, and then pass that on to the people who it's necessary to pass that on to, you know, then you've done your job. And as far as I'm concerned, she's one heck of a writer. You know, I sometimes wish that some of the writers, Sewell and Gray, and actually some of the Legends writers, I totally wish that some pieces of the canon weren't actually as fleshed out as they are, so that we would have a little bit more room to find out exactly why and how Jango Fett, for instance, you know, pulled it together, and because it feels like they've gone away from that, or they're focusing on Boba and they're focusing on the Clone Wars and things like that. But there were a heck of a lot of things in Legends that I did like, you know, particularly the Bounty Hunter video game and Jango Fett's origin story in that was incredible. And then, so, you know, I'm looking forward to all of it. And, you know, any sort of these, you know, I even love Resistance. Do I have that first or second season feel like I did in Rebels? Like, where are they going?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
You do? Okay, interesting.
But, you know, I feel like it's coming to fruition. It's coming. It may not happen before the first season finale for me.
Yeah.
And it may not actually kick into gear until the second season, very similar to the way Rebels did. But there's something here, and there's something good. And the video style, the animation style reminds me so much of the anime that I enjoyed as a child, Star Blazers and Voltron, and in particular Robotech. It's awesome, and I'm really glad to see it coming to a point where now my son is now asking, well, Dad, we got to catch up with Resistance.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome, because you can't push them into it, because otherwise they won't like it.
That's right.
Like if Dad says this is cool, immediately it's not cool.
No, it's not cool.
So so I just basically do what I do, and if they jump on the train, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just the natural progression of it too. I mean, it's one of those things, and I hear this all the time from Christopher James Letty, Mr. Vintage Viewport himself here at the network. He's got 2 young daughters, and it's another thing where his oldest daughter, he's trying to say hey, this is Star Wars, this is that, and he's not forcing it, but it's one of those things that when Chris is listening to it or watching it, his daughter will come over and will therefore become curious about it. And I've seen many pictures of her playing with the little Rebel Commandos and having the little Ahsoka action figure amongst the rest of her toys. It's just one of those things. It's a special bond, and it's just so nice to see that adaptation amongst Star Wars fans does happen. It doesn't happen with everybody, of course. There are kids that are still into Voltron, Transformers, other things, and then move their way into Star Wars later in life. But it's just so nice to see those connections as families with Star Wars, and to see that it bonds everybody together. And like we've been saying here, folks, Galaxy's Edge is going to be another one of those bonding points, I feel, for families across the world and across this country as well. In times that are, can be pretty sad and and pretty depressing, there's something like that lays out there for all of us to enjoy. And we're not going to stop. That's what I'd love to say all the time to people. And I'm sure, John, you say this to people as well. They're like, oh, how can you do what you do in this world right now? And it's like, it actually motivates us. It's a reason to keep talking about the things that we're passionate about. It's a reason to keep pushing a very positive message, and to bring families together and to have these conversations. I feel it really is that where other people are just like, you know what? I'm just going to deal with what's going on. No, be passionate about something and don't let it skew you and push you off track.
I almost feel like it's almost more selfish for me, Robin.
Sure.
The idea that I have someone like Kathleen Kennedy to look up to.
Sure.
Right. And her ability to transcend all these different genres and now different medias while the head of a major corporation.
Yeah.
It's, I think one of the hardest things as we get older is that how often our mentors fall away. Not because they've done something wrong,
right,
or because something is nefarious, but just because you've outgrown them.
Sure.
And I'm never going to outgrow Kathleen Kennedy. I'm never going to outgrow Carrie Fisher. I'm never going to outgrow Mark Hamill.
No.
Because these people allow, based on their perspective on things and the ability to not care or give a crap about whether people like them or not, there's an honesty to Mark Hamill's tweets. There was a sincerity to everything that Carrie Fisher did.
Absolutely.
And I have to say that watching Kathleen Kennedy ignore the crap out of all the haters
That's right.
and consistently be on the forefront of the movie making business is inspirational. And having those moments of inspiration are important to all of us, no matter the age. And I think that as I move into my mid-40s, the thing that Star Wars keeps giving me is inspiration and something to look forward to. Because let's face it, our jobs are often tedious, are often not what we wanted, but they're necessary, particularly you and I working in education, etc.
Absolutely.
We have an important role to play. And being, but sometimes in every job, whether, I used to work at Taco Bell when I was in high school, up until what I'm doing now, there's tedium in every job. And so having this ability to see that, I'm sure there's an awful lot of tedium in Bob Iger or Kathleen Kennedy's jobs.
Absolutely.
And seeing how they deal with it. I just read that Bob Iger gets up at 4:15 in the morning to do his Stairmaster. and that he's having breakfast with his wife at 6 o'clock, and he's in the office at 6:45, having read the newspaper. Right.
Wow.
Now, and this is a man who's in his 60s talking about innovation and making sure that they're staying at the forefront. I can learn from that, because there's times where I'm like, oh my God, there's a new social media network. I don't want a new iPhone. I don't want to learn how to use that new camera. And why can't I put borders on my Instagrams?
Right.
You know, like I loved doing that. And you know, so it's like, I feel like this ability to continue learning, a la Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, which I think was I literally think that is the point that so many people missed, is that you're never done being a Jedi.
Nope.
Right? You are learning the entire time. And Luke was trying to impart that on Rey. You know, you're not a superhero, is what he was trying to say. That this is, you know, more closely connected to the entire universe than you just having this power. And he needed to be reminded about that by somebody who had passed into the beyond and had all of the knowledge necessary at that point to give that advice. And so every time I saw Last Jedi in the theaters, I want to say 10 times. And every time I came away with something new. Absolutely. Whether it was that first time when it was just the visceral experience, or the last time, you know, or, you know, in the middle there where I really truly understood as a teacher, as somebody who's working in education, how important that line of we are what they grow beyond.
Oh, yes.
I mean, come on. I mean, and honestly, that has informed my parenting sense. And it's, I'm not always this philosophical, guys, by the way. This is, you know, this is me having a quiet moment, knowing that the door is shut and that the children are upstairs happily playing with mom. I'm usually a little bit more visceral, and I'm not so in my head. So I apologize for that.
No, that's the whole point here, man, is to really dig into this stuff. Like that's what Make the Jump is all about. If you listen to the episodes, I mean, Caden Stetler and myself, we always get very philosophical with it. But that's what Star Wars is. It's a very philosophical conversation. And it's something that, like you said, it goes beyond what we've been taught. It goes beyond what has been presented to us, and we're allowed to think, and we are allowed to, because of this franchise and everything that this world has given us, we are allowed to have those thoughts and to share them. And that's what's so special about this entire thing.
Oh, thank God too, because otherwise we would have been we'd have to read the Odyssey over and over. Hey, which is great. You know what? You can read the Odyssey, and it can be a very, as I said, visceral experience about what a guy is doing when he's, you know, stuck away from home, or you can get there real deep. But after reading it a number of times, at least we have new stuff coming all the time.
That's
true. I apologize for breaking in there. I know you had another thought.
No, absolutely not. That was actually perfect. That was absolutely perfect. I loved it. Well, I think we've gotten to that point here on Make the Jump. John, I don't know if you know this part of the show. On any show that we do here at the Podcast Network, it's a little thing we like to call plug time here at the BrickCityBlockade.com Podcast Network. John, where can the good people find you across social media?
All right. First off, let me give another shout out to DSNYnewscast.com and making StarWars.net. That's where you're going to get as much of me as possible. But if you want to just make it easy on yourself, follow me at Twitter at JMBishopJR, at JMBishopJr. And that'll be where you can find what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, why I'm frustrated, what's going on in my world. And then I really do hope that you interact with me. As I said, I'm always trying to learn, and lots of perspectives are important, especially when the world is so strange at the moment. But in the meantime, to be a little less philosophical, we can at least try to bide the time between now and December a little easier together.
Absolutely. You guys can follow me over on Twitter at Mr. Vote Tweets. Check out all my tomfoolery and everything happening in my life over on Instagram at the official vote. Check out www.brickcityblockade.com for everything happening in the friendom that brings the unity to the community here at the Podcast Network. Patreon to support the network, TeePublic to rock the network, and please make sure to continue to join our efforts, A Galaxy of Joy with Starlight Children's Foundation, bringing smiles to kids' faces in hospitals around the country and around the world. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to our friend Steven Stanton, and it means a lot to the entire Star Wars community. John, it's been so awesome having you on Make the Jump, my friend. We hope to have you on very soon, and a Happy New Year to you as well.
Okay, may the Force be with all of you.
Always.